Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session, BAInsights session, that is, on business architecture. And once again, joined by three excellent guests to talk us through that topic. But let's start with some introductions. And if I can, Reggie, could you introduce yourself first, please?
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, John. And it's lovely to meet you, Tim and Barbara. So I'm Reggie Musonza, and I'm based here in South Africa. I've been a practicing business analyst for quite a number of years. I think I've lost track, certified in business analysis as a CBAP as well. I've worked across various industries, doing some implementations of complex technologies, complex projects as well. I've led management consulting firms in business analysis. So currently, I run my own business doing management consulting and with a specialty in business analysis and business architecture. We help clients drive their strategic intent, deliver on their customer experience and improving on customer experience. And my experience has been across the financial services sector, so that's private banking and investment and insurance. I've worked in vehicle telematics, doing vehicle tracking. I've got experience in gaming and bookmaking, implementing some initiatives and technologies there. And maybe I would say at present, I'm currently working in the records management space. So yeah, which is quite a very interesting space for me. Understanding all technologies and how businesses can leverage off that, and doing some digital transformation initiatives that also include some artificial intelligence around it. So yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I've done some business analysis coaching, training, and I've got a business that specializes in business analysis training at present.
Excellent. Thank you, Reggie. Yeah, so certainly plenty of experience for this very topic. So excellent. Tim, over to you if you could as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John, for having me today. And great to meet you, Reggie, and great to catch up with you again, Barb. Yeah, my name is Tim Coventry. I'm CEO of a consulting company called Businessanalysis, BAPL. We're the largest specialist consulting firm in the Southern Hemisphere. So very proud to be able to lead an organization that is solely practicing business analysis. I've worked as a business analyst in 18 countries around the world. So I've been very lucky to be able to see business analysis in many different countries, including yours, John, the UK, and also in the US as well. So it's been a great experience working with many different cultures and experience business analysis around the world. And the really one thing that I think is quite incredible is that business analysis is done everywhere, in every organization, in every country around the world. And the more that I travel and see and speak to people, the more I realize that business analysis and some of the challenges of business analysis are exactly the same around the whole world. So this conversation tonight, I think, is going to be continuing that theme. So I'm looking forward to it.
I agree, Tim. And Tim, I hear there's a book with your name on it that's been written as well. Is that right?
There is. Only part of an author. Very lucky to work with Angela Wick, and her and I go back a number of years, and we've had a terrific time over the last probably 15 months now in writing a book that we think is very topical about AI and business agility, and also business analysis, making sure that we're connecting AI with business agility. And I think that's a pretty well a good topic that we can hopefully cover with talking about business architecture and strategy.
I'm sure we will. And interestingly, last week Angela was on one of these sessions with an image of that very book, Tim, in the right hand corner. So good advertising.
So I've got the real copy here. If we can actually get that on focus, but maybe not. So
that's right. We'll share that later for sure. Anyway, Tim and Barbara, over to you for your introduction, please.
Thanks, John, and Reggie and Tim. I'm glad to be here with you all. Such varied experience in this small little group. It's very exciting. I have a lot of the same kinds of experience that John and Tim do. I've done a lot of business analysis consulting, and had a business analysis training company for a long period of time. I got involved with the IIBA at the very beginning of the association. Actually, prior to that, my training company had built a little business analysis certification program because so many of our customers were saying, how do we know these people called business analysts really know what they're doing? And I was so happy when the IIBA came into being because I felt that the certification should be done by an independent association. And so over the years, I've volunteered with IIBA. I've helped start some chapters. I was one of the original contributors to the BAC. And most recently, I've been on the board of directors of the International Association for 8 years. My second term just ended last week. And so I'm so happy to have watched and continue to watch the growth of what we call business analysis, which is still sometimes a hard discipline to explain to people who don't know anything about it. But we're getting better, and more people are aware of what we're talking about and how valuable we are. And so I'm always looking forward to these types of conversations, John, where we get to talk about our experience and maybe give some ideas to people that are doing this type of work to help them and fortify their confidence in what they're doing.
Excellent, thank you, Barbara. And as you say, yes, very much these sessions are to spread the word, spread awareness, share our experience as well. So this one will prove to be another interesting session, I'm sure. Perhaps we can start with Reggie, if we could. I mean, could you just explain your view on how you would define business analysis and what its importance is to modern organizations?
Okay, so talking about business architecture, right? Even speaking about it from my own business analysis perspective, I would say it is something that brings alignment from the leadership, from strategy executors or strategy planners to the implementation teams. So what we're trying to do as an organization, or what organizations are trying to do, is looking at the vision that they have, which obviously gives birth to a strategy, but that strategy is meaningless if it's not executable. It needs to have some implementation teams that get to execute. So business architecture then, if you look at it from, if I literally looking at an architectural diagram, let's say you want to build a house, you've got a vision, this house must be 3-bedroom house. It must have a garage somewhere, there must be a swimming pool somewhere, it's 500 square meters of land and that sort of thing. That's the vision that you have of wanting to build that structure, right? So you now need to get to understand what is it really, let's put it on paper. So that's me drawing there, putting that framework to say, it will look something like this. This is what this is. So we translate that in a way in the business side to say, this is how we're going to, this is what we're trying to do vision-wise, this is the strategy, and this is how we want to execute. So it's just bringing that whole alignment. In a business sense, we're talking about the capabilities that are there. How are we going to get the value that we actually want to do, and how is it going to be done? What are the capabilities? What are the things that we currently have that can help us to achieve that strategic intent?
And that's quite a nice way to start, Reggie, in terms of like easy to correlate. Think about like the building plans that you mentioned as well, or the architecture of the house. It's quite a nice way to relate to it, I think. So thank you for that. Tim, what would be your perspective?
Well, I guess I'm just going to leverage off what Reggie said, because I don't think there's too much that I can really add to it. He said it really, really well. I think the really good thing that Reggie talked about was he talked about the idea of a house, architecture in a house, talking about that, you do want 3 bedrooms, you do want a number of bathrooms, you might need a carport or a garage. All of these things are simply requirements around what you need to have within building a house. Now, the beauty about why you'd want to understand those things, and I'll relate this back to business architecture as opposed to building a house architecture, is that once you've got some of these designs, it's very easy to add to them or expand them, or you make them repeatable. So the quality of building a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house becomes easy. It's a repeatable process. The same thing happens with business architecture. If we look at a TOGAF definition around that, it talks about that we're looking at a business strategy, governance of an organization, and the key business processes. I'll say that again because I think there's enough, hasn't been emphasized enough in business architecture. The key business processes for the organization. That's what's defined as being business architecture for an organization.
Thank you, Tim. And Barbara?
I agree with everything that's been said. And I think one of the challenges that we face is it's kind of easy to think about if you're building a brand new house and this plan, this architecture, laying it all out, figuring out what you want. I think the really hard thing for most of us we're working in organizations that already exist, and that maybe a nice plan and a really logical blueprint was never created. The organization grew organically, sometimes in some really strange ways. So when we go in, and one of the first things I think that business architects do, and also business analysts, is try to look at the organization and figure out, what is its culture? What is its organizational structure? What processes do they have? What we find is a lot of really strange, seemingly crazy structures that don't always make a lot of sense. And so it's hard, it's not as simple as saying, oh, we're just going to lay out, on paper, this organization's architecture, because sometimes it's not exactly the way that we would like for it to be, right? But we've got to understand the current state before we can even think about recommending some adjustments to that. And then the adjustments are hard. Sometimes these structural kind of changes that you get involved with are very difficult for organizations. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with the processes. It's all about the culture and the people and the way the organization has developed over time. So there's a hard skill, a scientific skill of doing capability modeling and process modeling, but there's also a lot of soft skills or human dynamics about understanding why the organization is the way it is, and how best we might help the organization improve.
Can I just add to that, Barb? Because I think you raised a really good point about that it's not always a new build. In actual fact, I don't think new builds exist.
It ever is. Yeah.
Everything under the sun has been done before, to quote Sherlock Holmes. However, I think that there is a similarity between it. And I think where the similarity is, it's like a renovation. And in a lot of the times, what we're doing is we're going into an organization that is already existing, and we're looking to, and this comes back to the definition of business analysis, which, I believe the definition of business analysis is really about in fact, we use techniques and also we do tasks and we use tools to enable us to solve problems or take advantage of opportunities within organizations. So to me, it's a little bit like a renovation. And one of the critical things that you work with if you're going and doing a renovation, and I've done a couple in my time, so I've got some practical experience around this, some blood, some sweat, and some tears. But one of the first things that you do is that you actually do a plan. If a plan doesn't exist, you actually do architecture, and you make sure that you understand where things are before you actually start making changes. Make sure that you understand which walls are load bearing and which walls are not load bearing. Don't just grab a sledgehammer and start bashing on it. And I know sometimes that's what it feels like. It feels like somebody throws you a sledgehammer and you're told just to start getting on with it. The developers are waiting. Start getting the requirements done, and we need to chuck them over the wall to the developers.
That's something that's reassuring.
I feel, sorry, John.
Sorry. I was going to say, it's going to quite reassuring that actually it's a similar situation what we see in I guess core business analysis, where there's quite often a push to get stories to developers so they can start building and start working on products, when actually there's a lot of thought that needs to go on first to make sure the products that you're designing, the process is understood. And that's very much the case with business architecture, and you're trying to figure out, are the building blocks that you want to try and create, are they the right ones? How do they align with the current ones that you might need to change in some cases? And sorry, Reggie, you had a point.
Yeah, I think this building analogy will carry us through this, because probably it's the foundation of architecture that we probably all understand. But I just want to add to what Tim said, to say we almost always get into all these organizations that are already established, right? Just like a building that is already in existence. But there's something that gives birth to the idea of carrying out a renovation, changing the way things are currently, right? And with business architecture, it's exactly also the same, because you look at the disruptive nature of business, new technologies that come up, new concepts that come up, new startups that come up. And to existing organizations, that architecture also needs to change. But when it changes, the organization has to be that agile, especially nowadays, because of how easy it is to disrupt things digitally. But as that changes, there has to be confidence in the execution thereof, to say, okay, we are going to change this. We are going to remove this load-bearing wall, and we're going to put this structure. But in that execution, there has to be confidence in that this is what is actually going to work. So business architecture helps the organization to understand those capabilities, to make those, to become agile in those changes, to have confidence in the execution of that strategy, and understanding what they currently have that they can leverage off, be it data, be it processes, looking at the current capabilities that they have that are good for their strategic intent, and strengthening those capabilities. Yeah.
And that's a nice segue, Reggie, into sort of like taking us into a bit more detail around, what are the sort of outputs that we should expect from business architecture? Because obviously you mentioned data or information. I know there's been a couple of other points made before, but Tim, I wonder if you'd be able to give your view on the sort of component or the outputs that we would expect of business architecture.
Yeah, look, sorry, I've got my puppy is wants to get in on the act. I think that whole analogy of building and that sort of thing. I think she really likes to get out there and get her hands dirty and do things. So sorry about that in the background. But yeah, look, I think the thing about business architecture is that I think it relates back, and it should always relate back to what is the organization trying to achieve. When I look at organizations, I see three patterns in organizations. I see organizations are typically for a profit, and those organizations exist everywhere in the world. You've got non-profit organisations such as IIBA, and one of those things about a non-for-profit is that it's a non-for-profit, but it's also it's a not-for-loss as well. So a lot of the attributes of a profit organisation relate back to a non-for-profit. And then you have government agencies which are really interested in providing for citizens as well. The common thing across all of those is that all of those organisations deliver to a customer, to a citizen, to a member, whatever you're going to call that class, whatever it is, they're basically delivering either products or services or both of those to an organisation. So really the key DNA of any organisation is it's about delivering products and services. And for us to understand how those products and services are actually going to be delivered, then in most organisations, and I'm talking, we're probably talking about 80% of organisations. 80% of organisations deliver those products and services through external value streams or internal value streams and processes. So to me, that's one of the things that is really critical in terms of the assets, and Angela and I talk about these as assets within our book. We talk about the components of business architecture being simply assets, and those assets are made up by a number of things. And the best example that I relate back to is the Zacklin framework, which talks about the 6 interrogatives. So to me, it's about answering those 6 questions, which is the why, which is the most important thing that we need to always be answering for an organisation. Why does this exist in the organisation? What's the benefit of this product or service being delivered to customer through the internal and external value streams? Then the next is the how, and that is the value streams. The how is the value streams. Connected to the how is the what, the data, the information that is being used across those processes to deliver those products and services to the citizens, to the members, to the whatever you want to call your end consumption of the products and services. And then you've got the who is actually performing that information, who is managing those processes as well. They're our stakeholders. Typically, they're our stakeholders that we talk about. And then you've got the where, which is the location often, and then you've also got time, so the when. So when is something happening as well? Now you answer all those 6 interrogatives, and if you have assets built up over a period of time which relate to all of those 6 interrogatives, then all of a sudden you've actually got the whole plan of the organisation. You've got the why does it exist? What's the strategy moving forward? You've got all of the underlying information that actually makes the organisation complete.
Excellent. And I mean, it nicely sort of corroborates with a session we had so many BAInsights ago around the why, when, who, how, etc. as well. So it's nice to bring that in. But
to me, it's a valuable tool, John. Yeah. It's incredible. You answer those questions, and most of your analysis can fit underneath all of these components. It's a great tool.
And it just shows those sort of simplistic at times way of thinking about things first. Just a good way of making sure that ultimately, when you go into more detail, that you're going into it with the right context and the right mentality in mind. Barbara, your view on the outputs or components of business architecture. Oh, you're on mute, by the way, Bob.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I've been struggling with allergies a little bit, so I'm trying not to cough into your microphone. I think because I'm kind of third on the question here, I'll maybe take the side of what are the challenges. I think one of the big challenges, or maybe the biggest challenge for an architect and for, again, an analyst, and I see business analysts and business architects being really doing a lot of the same work, is just, and I totally agree with Tim and the framework. I mean, the Zachman framework has held up from the beginning of, when he first articulated it, and it still is solid. How much do we actually try to document? And this ties in with the popularity of how Agile came on the scene, 20 years ago, with this idea we don't need to document anything, because I think traditionally we as business analysts tended to and I still do like to document things. I like to have a design, a diagram, a picture, a list. But the Agilists kind of reminded us that, hey, you can document all day long, but you're not doing anything to help the organization. So documentation for itself is not necessarily going to get you to where you're trying to get. It doesn't, help you be as agile as you can be. So now the challenge that we face as business analysts and architects is how much, that idea of barely sufficient documentation, which I love from Agile, and just enough and just in time. Those concepts are really important. And I find a lot of people doing this work really struggle with that. And I do myself also. How far do we go? How much do we do? And one of our challenges as business analysts, many of us are recovering perfectionists. And we don't like to draw a diagram or write a document that isn't completely perfect and isn't completely done. But that's one thing I'm trying to break people of the habit of. Models are never really finished. Documents of these type may never be complete, but you have to get just enough. What are you trying to communicate? Why are you documenting it? Who is it for? Who's your audience? What are you using it for? And get just enough so that you can actually move forward and get something done. And to me, that's one of the biggest challenges that we face in this area right now, is knowing when we've done enough, when it's ready to share, knowing that it will not be perfect, it will not be complete. And also, are you going to maintain it over time? Because it can take a lot of time to maintain those things. Is that a good idea or not?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's quite a good way of looking at things, and stops business architecture becoming this very theoretical thing that actually is quite difficult to implement. Because if you're always mindful that you're going to try and deliver just in time, well, actually, to do that, you've got to think about who you're delivering to, what they need from you, and that often means, particularly if we're thinking agile, they're already started, they're ready to go. They're not waiting for us to have, years worth of theoretical documentation before they start. So it's quite a nice way of looking at it and preventing that just being stale and sitting on the shelf.
But there's sort of that, and I really like what Barb was talking about there, because I think touched on some really key points. Just because the agile is standing there with a sledgehammer ready to go doesn't mean to say that that's a good thing. And one of the things that is really has hurt a lot of business architects and enterprise architects is that it's too theoretical. The change is not happening within the organization. Now, if an organization lifespan now is dropped from 68 years to 17 years, and it's likely to decrease within the next couple of decades, even further than that, then to me, you don't want to be sitting around doing plans for plan's sakes, or else the organization may not exist at all. So I think that, we're at a really interesting time. I think the agile movements come through, and I think there's been some incredible things that have changed within Agile. I actually did Agile back in the UK in the year 2000 before it was even called Agile. It was just smart working. And I think we're starting to see a shift with this. We're starting to see that maybe some of that just getting on and writing user stories didn't really give us the value streams, the real products and services that we were delivering, and some of those things that we know are just repeatable patterns. You know, processes are processes. I know that having worked in multiple countries around the world, recruiting processes are exactly the same in all parts and different countries around the world. Lots of different organizations have exactly the same steps within a process. So trying to brainstorm around the best way of doing it, probably go back to what's the patternized over time, because that pretty well is telling you the best ways of doing it. So I think we're in a bit of a moment at this stage in history, in that I think we're going to see architecture play a more important part. And the reason that I say that is many of these assets, the issue that's been around for many of these assets is that they are laborious. That as soon as you've gone and written the to-be, they're now becoming the as-is. So you've got to redo them again. And it's a constant maintenance. Now with AI, I believe that is going to change. AI is going to have a big impact into the way business architecture is actually performed. And some of these things that, as business analysts, we know that they're repeatable. I've had customers ask me to redo requirements that we did 6 months ago. And I tell them, well, what was wrong with the ones that we did 6 months ago? And they say to me, oh, well, I didn't know we'd had them. So, you know, it's that repeatability. It's exactly the building analogy, is that if you get the plans right, then you're only making agile changes to them. You're not just being agile for agile's sake.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's interesting. Yeah. Maybe if I would come in and just give an example, I mean, probably something practical from my side. So at some point I had an assignment at a bank here in South Africa, and the South African financial service system is a quite robust and well-regulated space. And for the longest time, they've been key players in the banking sector. But with the advent of technology, it has made it much more easy for smaller players to come in now, leveraging off technologies. They don't have to have a physical branch structure to set up services. They can have in-store banking. You can do online application and everything. You do it over your phone. You've got a bank account like that, be it for personal, be it for business. So it poses a huge risk. That disruption poses a huge risk to these traditional banks that are there. So at some point, we wanted to develop a new product, a new experience for small medium enterprises. And it had to be done in a very short space of time, because these new players were already there, delivering and capturing that small market, already that market that the bank was already losing. And that's why I saw the value of business architecture, because now you look at what are your competitors doing and what services or what experiences are they giving to the customers that you as a traditional bank are not giving. And we had to look and say, okay, this is what they are doing. How can we leverage off what we currently have so that we take a product to market in the shortest possible time? And it was having those strong architects who understood, okay, if we are to open an account, this is the capability that we're going to leverage off. If we are going to process payments, this is the capability that we're going to leverage off. And traditionally, it used to take probably 6 months or so just to take a product to the market. But we managed to do it leveraging off business architecture in a very short space of time, because we got to understand, we had the data of what the market was doing. We had the capabilities of developing this product, leveraging off the current infrastructure that was there, the current capabilities that were actually there to take a product to market in a very short space of time. And that was quite profound. I mean, that was probably my greatest experience that gave me a lot of interest into venturing more into business architecture.
And it gives quite a good example, Reggie, of sort of bringing together some of the things that Barbara and Tim made earlier on in terms of it not being coming from the start, do business and architecture from a blank page. It's a renovation, you're enhancing and organically growing as well. It feels like a good example of using those pre-existing capabilities to try and deliver new products or new services. I wonder, just as Tim a little while ago, I think you mentioned, I think it was the TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework one, right? And I wonder, perhaps we'll start with Barbara on this one, in terms of not just frameworks like the TOGAF, but are there any particular, they may be frameworks, but they may be approaches or they may be methodologies, but any of those types of things that you tend to utilize when you are doing business architecture?
Well, one thing, John, that I've been doing a lot of research on and some work in the area of developing strategic plans for organizations, which is interestingly in some ways the same thing as business architecture. I mean, I've been trying to get people to see them as kind of, you know, the same sort of idea.
Yeah.
And what I found, I did some research on frameworks that are used to build strategies. There are lots and lots of different ones. Most of them are proprietary because traditionally companies have hired a consulting company to come in and help them build their strategy, right? And they, you know, take the executives to an off-site meeting for a week and they play golf and they build strategy. And you know, the consulting company charges a lot of money and has a structure and, you know, lays this all out. And some of those strategies are great strategies that they come up with. The problem, and I think going back to what Reggie said right at the beginning, is aligning that with what's actually being done in the organization is the hard part. But what I'm seeing and what I hope we're going to see is, first of all, building strategies should include more people than just executives, and specifically people who are good business analysts can be really helpful in helping an organization formulate their strategy, because we do understand the existing business architecture. We do understand what's going on in the industry. And we can do good research. We also facilitate conversations very well. So I think we ask the why question. You know, we would get the people building strategy to think a little bit more deeply about, yeah, why are we going to do this and how are we going to do this and what are the current capabilities? I think we just have an important role to play. And so, you know, I don't have like a favorite framework. Like I say, I've looked at a lot of them. Most of the frameworks are pretty consistent in terms of the components. And I think Tim laid that out nicely and aligned it with Zachman. They have to have, you know, a mission statement or vision of what is your organization trying to accomplish. And it should not be making money, even if I'm a for-profit. I mean, if you don't have a bigger view of what you're trying to accomplish, you're probably not going to be around for long. And then we always have to know the who. The audiences are so important. Who are all the stakeholders? And one of the changes you're seeing now is most organizations are recognizing that stakeholders like the general public and the environmental impacts of what they do are being added to the list of, yes, I've got to support my customers and my stakeholders, but there's a greater number of stakeholders that we have to deal with. And then, you know, all the frameworks look at setting some realistic goals at an organizational level or objectives. And then again, the hard part, and Tim and I know Tim has worked on this a lot too, is how do you get those goals to be broken down and tied or traced to individual initiatives and projects in the organization? And how do you communicate to all the people working on those initiatives this is why you're doing the work that you're doing. And if what you're doing doesn't look like it's aligning with strategy, you ought to be raising a red flag. And this is a big thing I always tell every business analyst from the most junior level up. You have to know why you're doing the work you're doing and how does it support your organization. If you can't describe for me how your work is helping forward the organization and their vision, then you've got a problem.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I mean, there's just that generic kind of framework that we've got to have the traceability.
That's it. And actually, by understanding that, it gives BAs an opportunity to work with other BAs and see
Right.
what's going on in other
Right.
parts of the organisation as well.
Exactly.
And what it shows as well, just from your answer there, Laura, is that there's a lot of skill sets that the BA possesses that are very, very relevant to business architecture. Perhaps it's just really the level that they apply them to typically differentiates themselves from a business architect at times.
Right. I think that is absolutely true, because when you're working on a specific project for a specific maybe business unit, you're doing the architecture kind of at that level. You're making sure you understand all the processes that are going to be impacted, who the stakeholders are, why is this being done? How is it being done? A lot of times business architects are looking at things at a little higher level, maybe an entire department level or the entire enterprise level. But it's the same. If you look at the BAC knowledge area called strategy analysis, assess the current state, design the future state, figure out how you're going to get from one to the other. That's the same basic concepts that we always should be doing.
Yeah, excellent. And gents, I know it's going to be hard to follow after the excellent answer Barbara gave, but perhaps we'll start with you, Reggie, in terms of any additional approaches, methodologies, frameworks that you tend to use or think about from a business architecture perspective.
I would say from my perspective, yeah, there isn't really much that I can add to what Barbara said, but the common frameworks that are there, your Zachman's, your TOGAF, those are good frameworks. There's also a lot of material that you can also find. There's I think the Business Analysis Guild. They've got the BAPL, which is also quite a good framework to use. But one of the things that I also do with probably to get my clients understand business architecture and to adopt some of these frameworks is to say, looking at the strategies that they have, looking at the visions that they have, they obviously have had strategies in the past, right, that they've tried to execute. Have they ever measured the successfulness of those strategies before, right? Because then you bring it back to them to say, okay, you want to adopt a new strategy, you want to execute this strategy. What else have you executed in the past? What has been your success rate in those? It's quite a, let me say, a controversial or a confrontational question, because you almost as always are confronting leadership and highlighting their success rate or their failure rates in their execution, because they are the ones who are planning this strategy. So it's something that just invokes their minds and say, okay, cool, let's really have a look at it. Because the nice thing also about business architecture is that it brings a lot of transparency to the things that we're trying to do. We give clarity to strategy, we give clarity to this vision. We actually look at what we're good at. Okay. It's more almost like having a SWOT analysis of what we're trying to do. So let's leverage off what we're currently capable of. Let's strengthen what we can do, but also let's look at the weaknesses that we've had in the past. So that's what I'm saying. Business architecture, and that helps bring that to the fore, and it helps organizations start to think clear.
That's great. John, if I can just, I totally agree with Reggie and share one quick story. One of my clients, they bring a lot of new products to market. And, as Reggie points out, some of those products have been successful and some have not. And I was working with the CEO and the steering committee and suggested that we do a retrospective on some of the prior projects that were brought to market, and what went well, what didn't go well. And it was really interesting because everybody said, oh no, we don't want to do that. We don't need to go back and look at those. because everyone in the room sort of knew that a couple of those products were really not very successful. And they didn't really want to open up a discussion. There was, I think, a fear of somebody would get blamed, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I think even by my asking the question, everybody sort of knew, you know, yeah, we probably didn't make a good decision on that one. And now the new products that they're looking at, they're taking a little bit more time to sort of think them through. And so I think even if we don't get them to talk about them a lot, I think by bringing it up, we are making them think, you know, and helping to change culture a little bit about how they would do things going forward.
I agree. And you both bring up an interesting point here as well, making sure that the metrics, KPIs, measures are really factored in as well from the start. So it doesn't become this, you know, theoretical response when we ask the question, what went wrong? And hopefully we can get the organisations thinking about that from an architecture top-down perspective, then actually gives them the ability to change direction of products. There's such an example you mentioned, Barbara. If they're not working out, they're not delivering what the client actually needs, it's a good chance to course correct rather than just to push on blindly.
Right.
So some nice points made there. And Tim, your view, if there's anything you want to add?
Yeah, look, there's so much to unpick just from that last 10 minutes. But what I wanted to probably add and just to emphasize is just a couple of things. The first thing is that, you know, strategy is done poorly. Barb talked about that there's lots of different organizations that tend to bring their own methodologies. They're more interested in their methodology than I think really about good strategies and helping organizations really do extremely well, because they concentrate more on the methodology than really what is the more emotional mindset that's really needed for a strategy. And I forget the source that I recently read, but it was an incredibly insightful look at strategy. And this author was saying that strategy is meant to be uncomfortable, that in actual fact, most people get in love and have a honeymoon effect with the process. That the idea of going away for a week and doing some planning, following a framework and having all of this methodology in place, that's a comfort zone that naturally humans want to be in. And it's false. An idea of strategy should be bold. It should be challenging. It should keep you up at night. You should not know what the outcome's going to be. That in actual fact, success may not be success. You might actually be wrong. And when you actually look at very successful entrepreneurs, they are comfortable at not knowing all the answers. That in fact, they don't look at failure as failure. They look at failure as just a step to success. And therefore, a lot of the time, organizations are put into this almost, a coma sitting around strategy. And so no wonder you ask why are you doing something? There's a shock, because what you're doing is you're resetting an emotional set piece. Something that I really stress with all of our consultants is keep asking those questions. Barb talked about that there's different levels, and we've traditionally been in this project land, which I think is actually, you know, it's detrimental to our profession. Business analysis is business analysis. It's done at all levels of the organization. I think business analysts certainly have a different skill set and a different way of looking at problems or opportunities that often C-level executives and senior managers don't have. We have a way of looking at things through our skills and techniques, and a properly trained and certified business analyst can actually do these things really well, whereas somebody who's in a management role, they're doing business analysis, but that doesn't make them really good at business analysis. You know, it's a bit like, you know, everyone put on a Band-Aid, but does that make everyone a nurse? And does it make everyone a really good nurse? I don't think it does. So, you know, these are some of the challenges that we have, is that business analysis should certainly be done at the enterprise level. If you do find yourself at the project level, then still ask the question, why? How does this fit into the strategy? You know, a lot of the times we've been working with our clients to ask those questions. And we took one organization who had 30 different initiatives, and we made sure that we read the strategic plan for the organization. And guess what? None of those 30 aligned to the highest priority strategic plan.
Yeah.
So all we did was simply unravel, you know, 25% and focus 25% on the strategy. And all of a sudden we were delivering on the strategy. Say nothing, and it would have been 4 years on, and the strategy would not have been delivered. So I think that, you know, the world is changing, and one of the components that I see is that there's a lot of talk about product management in around our profession. And I think we've got to be really careful with product management, because I think that some of the groups talk about product management, and they have a different view to what business analysts see in all organizations. And you've got to be careful that we're not talking about oranges and apples. We've got to be talking about product management. A lot of the viewpoint of product management is a software development. You're developing software, the product itself contains all the features that are delivered to the customer. So there's no interaction between those products and services. I think 80% of organizations and a lot of business analysts are working with organizations that deliver products and services through value streams. And it's certainly the approach that you take is different with value streams than it is with simply a software that is delivered out, and it's all you're doing is you're doing feature development. So a lot of the times our conversations are going one way and going the other way, because we're really not talking about the same thing. So we've got to be very, very careful with that. But the point that I really wanted to touch on is that I think what's going to be very, very important, it's very important in the product management world of software delivery of features. It's around customer behavior changes. And Barb touched on this, and Angela and I talk about it a lot within our book, is we talk about customer behavior changes. And it's really important that we're tracking some of those customer behavior changes. I know that Mega have been doing this, Google have been doing this, Microsoft have been doing this for years and years. Amazon has certainly been looking at this for years and years and years. They're tracking metrics, proper metrics that are actually seeing some of the changes that we do within organizations and the effect that ripples through. I think for business analysts, performing business analysis, it's going to be really critical in the future that we actually not just understand the metrics, but we also make sure that our stakeholders are thinking about how we're going to measure the effect of those customer behavior changes as well.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's this, what we talked about, I know we've sort of a bit out of time almost, but we've talked about a number of very relevant things, both business architecture, bringing them nicely back to recognising the skill set that the BA has, and a number of things that BAs are already doing in most cases actually align quite nicely to it. Or in the case of what Tim's mentioned, you know, it just re-emphasises some of the things that we should be doing as BAs if we've taken our eye off it, you know, so thinking of the strategy and the direction of the organisation as well, to name just a couple of simple examples. But rather than me run the risk of repeating everything you've all said, and which is all far more valid than me repeating it, I'm sure, I'll just leave it there and thank you each of you for your insight. It's really appreciated that you've spent the time to share it. We definitely look forward to hearing more from each of you on not just the topic of business architecture, but business analysis more deeply. And certainly, Tim, we look forward to seeing more of the book as well that both Angela and you put together. Okay, but yeah, happy to we'll look out for you in the future, all of them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for the opportunity, John.